Some people can smile through dinner and still feel like they are carrying bricks home. They answer texts politely, show up on time, and somehow still feel emotionally underwater. From the outside, they look stable, mature, maybe even stronger than everyone around them. Inside, it feels like every thought is wearing wet clothes and asking to be carried. They're not dramatic, so nobody suspects how heavy ordinary days actually feel. That is part of the problem, because calmness can hide pain better than chaos. People trust the quiet person who never falls apart in public. They rarely ask what it costs to stay that composed. And sometimes the cost is everything the person cannot say out loud. There is a specific loneliness in being seen as okay when you are not. You become the one people lean on while secretly searching for somewhere to collapse. You learn how to hold your face still while your mind runs in circles. You learn how to keep conversations moving while your chest feels strangely tight. You become fluent in sounding fine without ever feeling safe enough to be honest. Over time, this starts looking like personality when it actually began as protection. A lot of calm people were not born peaceful. They became careful because chaos once lived too close to them. Maybe they grew up around explosive moods, unpredictable silence, or affection that changed overnight. Maybe they learned early that strong feelings made other people uncomfortable, impatient, or cruel. So they adapted in the smartest way they could. They made themselves easier to handle. They kept the volume of their pain low enough to stay loved. They watched rooms closely and learned how to avoid becoming another problem. That kind of survival can look incredibly mature from the outside. But inside, it often creates a person who never fully relaxes. Because being calm is not always the same thing as feeling calm. Sometimes calmness is just tension that has become beautifully organized. It is the steady voice that forms after years of swallowing panic. It is the thoughtful pause that was built from being interrupted too many times. It is a soft answer that grew around a fear of making things worse. That is why these people often seem wise beyond their years. They have spent a lifetime reading emotional weather before anyone else notices the clouds. They can tell when a conversation is about to turn sharp. They can hear disappointment in a tone that others completely miss. They notice the shift in someone's eyes before the words even arrive. That sensitivity makes them perceptive, but it also makes rest feel complicated. Because when your nervous system is trained to scan everything, peace never feels fully real. You can sit in a quiet room and still feel braced. You can be alone without actually feeling at ease. You can have a normal afternoon and still feel like something bad forgot to happen. This is where the heaviness starts confusing people. They think, nothing is wrong right now, so why do I still feel exhausted? But the body does not always care about the present moment first. Sometimes it responds to old patterns before the mind catches up. Sometimes your calm face is just years of practice arriving before your feelings do. And that practice can become almost invisible to everyone, including you. You may not even call it struggling anymore. You might call it being tired, needing space, or just having a lot on your mind. You might say you are introverted when you are actually emotionally overloaded. You might say you like being alone because people feel expensive lately. You might tell yourself you are fine because nothing obvious is falling apart. But heaviness rarely announces itself with dramatic music. Sometimes it shows up in smaller, quieter ways that are easy to excuse. You reread simple messages because your brain feels too crowded to respond. You leave social events early and blame the traffic or your schedule. You sit in your car for 10 extra minutes before going inside. You feel weirdly emotional after someone asks if you are doing okay. You get home from work and cannot explain why your bones feel discouraged. You crave connection, but the thought of performing your personality feels exhausting. You want someone to understand, but explaining yourself feels like another job. So you keep saying, I'm just tired. And maybe you are, but not in the ordinary way. This kind of tiredness is emotional weight without visible bruises. It is the fatigue of constantly filtering your inner world for public safety. It is what happens when your mind keeps translating pain into acceptable language. It is grief without a funeral, pressure without a headline, sadness without permission. And because it is hard to name, other people often underestimate it. They see your self-control and assume your heart must be light, that you're your steady voice and think you must have figured life out. They mistake your restraint for peace instead of recognizing it as endurance. That misunderstanding can follow you into every part of your life. In relationships, you may become the one who understands everyone except yourself. You notice their moods, anticipate their needs, and smooth over tension before it grows. You become emotionally useful, which makes people feel close to you. But usefulness is not the same thing as being deeply known. Sometimes people love how safe you feel without asking what makes you so guarded. They enjoy your stability while missing the sadness underneath it. They call you easygoing because they never see the internal negotiations. They do not see the sentences you delete before speaking. They do not hear the honest answer you buried under a softer one. They do not notice how often you leave pieces of yourself out. At work, this pattern can look almost admirable. You seem dependable, composed, and hard to shake under pressure. People bring you problems because you do not add panic to the room. But inside, every request can feel like another brick on an already loaded shelf. You keep delivering because slowing down feels guiltier than suffering quietly. You answer emails while emotionally frayed and somehow still sound thoughtful. You carry competence like armor, even when it is cutting into you. Then there is family, where this heaviness often gets its oldest shape. Some families reward the child who never needs too much. The one who stays reasonable becomes the one nobody checks on. The one who understands everyone becomes the one nobody explains things to. And years later, that child grows into an adult who minimizes their own pain automatically. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because they were trained to downplay it. They learned that keeping things calm was safer than being fully felt. So even now, when something hurts, they translate it into something smaller. They say, "It's not a big deal," while their sleep gets worse. They say, "I can handle it," while their chest carries static all week. They say, "I just need a little space," when they really need tenderness. That is the tragedy of hidden heaviness. The people most practiced at containing pain often receive the least care. Not because they deserve less, but because they reveal less. And they reveal less because revealing once felt dangerous, useless, or humiliating. So the cycle keeps feeding itself. You stay calm because you do not want to burden anyone. People assume you are fine because you stay calm. Then you feel even more alone because nobody notices. That loneliness can become strangely familiar. You start living with a private ache nobody can argue with because nobody sees it. You function, but functioning is not the same thing as feeling alive. You keep moving, but movement can hide just as much as stillness. Sometimes the heaviest people are the ones who keep everything looking normal. That does not make them weak. It usually means they became skilled before they ever got supported. There is intelligence in that adaptation, even if it hurts. There is sensitivity in it too. And sensitivity is not a defect. Sensitive people often carry more because they register more. They notice emotional undercurrents, contradictions, and shifts that other people walk right past. They feel subtle rejection, unspoken tension, and emotional distance with painful precision. That depth can be beautiful, but it can also be relentlessly tiring. Because when you feel everything deeply, even ordinary days leave fingerprints. A weird comment can stay with you for hours. A cold tone can change the whole color of your evening. A moment of being misunderstood can replay in your head like unfinished music. And still, you might say almost nothing about it. Not because it means nothing. Because it means too much, and you do not trust the room. That is an important difference. Calm people with heavy insides are not empty. They are often full beyond language, full of unsaid thoughts, edited reactions, unresolved hurt, and tenderness with nowhere to land. Full of memories that still influence rooms nobody else remembers. Full of awareness that rarely gets mirrored back with enough care. This is why simple validation can hit them so hard. One sincere sentence can undo hours of internal tension. One moment of being genuinely understood can feel almost suspicious at first. Because when you are used to carrying quietly, care can feel unfamiliar. You might not know how to receive it without apologizing. You might deflect compliments because they land in your grief. You might cry when someone speaks gently because your system expected effort, not softness. None of that is irrational. It makes sense when your inner world has been self-managed for years. What looks like overreaction is often delayed reaction. What looks like distance is often protection. What looks like detachment is sometimes emotional fatigue reaching its limit. And this is where the story starts changing. Not when the heaviness magically disappears. Not when you suddenly become expressive, healed, and effortlessly open. It changes when you stop misreading your calmness as proof that you are unaffected. It changes when you realize your composure has been carrying a hidden bill. It changes when you admit that being strong has also been making you lonely. That honesty matters more than people think. Because once you stop romanticizing your own endurance, you can finally listen to it. You can notice when your silence is wisdom and when it is fear. You can notice when solitude is restoring you and when it is hiding you. You can notice when your calm tone is grounded and when it is disappearing. That kind of self-awareness is not dramatic, but it is powerful. It gives language to feelings that used to stay trapped as tension. It lets you ask better questions before burnout answers for you. It helps you separate peace from numbness. It helps you see that carrying everything quietly is not the same thing as being okay. And maybe most importantly, it helps you stop judging your own heaviness. You are not broken for feeling more than you show. You are not weak for being exhausted by what you rarely express. You are not strange for looking composed while privately fighting a hard emotional gravity. A lot of thoughtful people live exactly like this. They become experts in appearing manageable. They become strangers to their own need for comfort. They become so responsible with their emotions that they forget emotions also need somewhere to go. That is why healing, for people like this, often looks surprisingly simple at first. Not easy, just simple. It can start with telling the truth in smaller rooms. It can start with not rushing to say, "I'm fine." It can start with admitting that calm does not always mean light. It can start with letting one trusted person see the unedited version. It can start with resting before you completely earn it. It can start with noticing how often your body asks for gentleness. These are quiet changes, but quiet changes can rebuild a life, especially for people who have spent years surviving through restraint. You do not need to become louder to become more honest. You do not need to unravel publicly to be real. You do not need to prove your pain by making it dramatic. Sometimes the bravest thing is simply refusing to keep dismissing yourself, refusing to translate your hurt into something smaller just to stay convenient, refusing to confuse emotional invisibility with maturity, refusing to keep carrying everything like it is your personality instead of your history. Because your heaviness is not random, it has roots. It has reasons. And once you understand those reasons, the shame around them starts loosening. You begin to see your calmness more clearly, not as fake, not as weakness, but as a survival language that helped you get here. And maybe now, it does not need to do all the talking. Maybe now your inner life deserves more than silent management. Maybe now your tenderness deserves witnesses, not just walls. Maybe now your exhaustion deserves compassion before it becomes collapse. Because the truth is, some of the calmest people are carrying entire storms internally. They are smiling in group photos while grieving versions of themselves nobody ever met. They are answering kindly while fighting thoughts that already feel too heavy to explain. They are showing up beautifully in places where they barely feel held. If that sounds familiar, you are not imagining your own weight. You are not too much for feeling deeply under a controlled surface. You are not failing because your outside does not match your inside. You are a person who learned how to survive without making a scene, and that may have saved you once. But you are allowed to want more than survival now. You are allowed to want relief that does not depend on hiding. You are allowed to be understood without first breaking apart in front of someone. You are allowed to be calm and still need care. That might be the part nobody told you. The quiet ones do not need less love. They usually need a kind of love that notices what never gets announced. A kind of love that hears the tiredness underneath the politeness. A kind of love that does not wait for visible collapse before offering softness. And until that love reaches you from someone else, start practicing it inwardly. Speak to yourself like someone worth checking on. Pause with yourself like someone whose silence means something. Treat your hidden heaviness like it belongs to a real human life, because it does. And maybe that is the deepest truth here. The person everyone calls calm may not be okay, but they are still incredibly alive, still feeling, still hoping, still carrying more heart than the room will ever notice. So if you have been heavy inside for longer than anyone knows, hear this clearly. Your calmness is real. Your pain is real too. And the version of you that carried both this long deserves to be met gently.